Hello, everyone. My name is Karina Rodriguez, and I'm the current president of the Broward County Hispanic Bar Association. I have with me today Judge Carlos Rebollo. He is a judge in Broward County, and he will be answering some great questions for us today. Judge, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Judge, when did you first join the bench?
December 2007, I was appointed by the governor. At that time, it was Charlie Chris.
And what division are you currently in?
Juvenile delinquency, and I've been there 7 or 8 years now.
What is your cultural background, or in other words, what is your heritage?
Okay, so my mother's parents, my grandparents on my mother's side, they were from Spain. My grandfather was from the northern part of Spain. My grandmother was from the southern part of Spain. They migrated to Cuba in the late 1920s. My mother was born in Cuba in 1935. She has 4 siblings. They were all born in Cuba. Pretty much everybody on my mother's side. My grandfather never gave up his Spanish citizenship, but the 5 siblings, my grandparents were able to flee communism in the late 50s, early 60s. My father's side, his mom was from Spain, Galicia. They called them Gallegos. His dad was Cuban. I was born in Cuba, and I like to tease Judge Diaz by telling him that he was not born in Cuba, so he's not technically Cuban. He was born in Hialeah, so he's a Cuban American, he can say. But that's pretty much the extent of my heritage. So its grandparents are mainly Spaniard. My parents and their siblings are Cuban, and I was born in La Habana. I have to give the date, 1958. Yes, I'm old. But I didn't migrate over here with my family, my mom and dad. I was 3 years old. It was in 1962, and my sister was 5 years old.
Wonderful. So you told us a little bit about your upbringing. Can you describe a little more what your upbringing was like?
We came to Miami, and this is what's been told to me by my parents. They gave us some toiletries, $100. My mother had a brother that was already living in New York since 1956, so it was before the revolution. He was the center. He brought kind of everybody on my mother's side together. It started in New York. We quickly moved to New Jersey, and I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, a very working class neighborhood in New Jersey, and I'm very proud of the area that I'm from, and to this day, I'm still very, very good friends with like many of the guys that I grew up with.
So you described some of your upbringing, and it wasn't all positive. It was challenging. Now, were there any challenges that you remember as you were growing up that have led you to gain some perspectives as a result?
Yes, financial challenge is obvious. My parents came here with nothing. When you left Cuba at the time that they did in 1962, when you boarded the Cuban plane out, they wouldn't let you take anything with you. If you got caught with anything on you, they would throw you out and you would not be getting on the plane. So financially, my dad, he worked 2-3 jobs at a time. My mom worked and babysat, worked at a Remco toy factory and stuff. But the neighborhood was a working class neighborhood, and it was diverse. There was Portuguese, there were Italian, there were Spanish, there were Cuban, Puerto Rican, and everybody got along. Everybody it was at the time back then. There was a lot of factories. That's what brought people there, was the work, the factory work. My dad did that. After about 10-15 years, he saved enough money, and he was in Cuba. He worked in the shoe business. He opened up a shoe store, and it was a very successful shoe store. And 15 years later, he got to semi-retire down here to Miami. or at least to South Florida, where every good Cuban goes to retire, I guess.
Judge, was there something in your upbringing that was especially helpful in getting you to where you are today?
There were two things, and I guess you can call them mentors. One was my father. And he passed away recently in May of this year. And I was very proud to tell folks when they would give me their condolences that I am where I am today, which is a circuit court judge in Broward County, and who I am today because of my father. My father taught me that respect. He taught me to go to school, get an education, and to make something of yourself. The other person was I went to a Catholic grade school, and then I went to an all-boys Catholic high school in Newark, New Jersey, Essex Catholic High School. It closed in 1980. I don't even know. I know that they don't have too many all boys, all girls. The schools have all become co-ed, obviously, although they keep telling me Belém down in Miami is also all boys. But I had a teacher there. His name was Robert Conway. He was a brother, a Christian brother. He was not a priest, but he was still belonged to the Christian Brothers order. They had a vow of celibacy, a vow of poverty. He also had a Juris Doctorate degree. And we would be in class, and my school was in a bad neighborhood. And he would look out the window and he would see a police officer pull a car over, and he would tell the whole class to get up, go over to the window, and then he would tell us what the police officer can do, what he couldn't do, the rights of the person in the car versus the rights of the police officer and stuff. I found that fascinating. It was a class called Government and the Law. It was my senior year in high school. We also went down to the Essex County Courthouse in Newark and got to watch a murder trial, which was fascinating. I was hooked. I wanted to be a prosecutor from then, a lawyer, and a prosecutor was also in the back of my mind. 10 years later, the woman that prosecuted that murder case that we saw, 10 years later, I was working in the Essex County Prosecutor's Office in Newark, and Gladys Cooper, the prosecutor, she was still working there too.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Do you believe that it's important to have cultural diversity on the bench? And if so, why or why not?
Oh, very much so. I believe in cultural diversity on the bench and throughout society. I came from Newark, which is a very multicultural. As a matter of fact, I think it's one of the most multicultural cities in the United States. Our bench should reflect our community. I'm not saying that we should have a quota, but I am saying that it should reflect the fact that we have 20%, 20+% of Hispanics population, 20+% African-American populations, the Haitian population, Haitian American population, the Jamaican population. It should all be reflected. We are all one big melting pot. I firmly believe, and I love this country, that it's the land of opportunity. And our forefathers saw to it that minority rights were, to some extent, that they were careful to make sure that the minority rights were always there. For example, that's why we have a system where the House of Representatives is by population. So every state, the state of Florida being a large population state, has a large population, but let's say the state of Hawaii does not. But when it comes to the Senate, every state gets 2 senators. And they did that on purpose to make sure that there was those minority rights there. So it's important that minority rights are never forgotten and never trampled over. And it's important that our diversity is what made this country great, among other things.
Judge, you mentioned that you were appointed in 2007. Now, having said that, over the years that you've been on the bench, have we gotten better at having diversity on the bench that's reflective of our community?
I think we have. I really think we have. I looked at the list for this event, and I believe I counted 12, if not 13 or 14 Hispanic judges, which is great. Wasn't that long ago, actually, it was around 2008 that three Hispanic judges that had been appointed were run against, and they lost their seats. And a big thing was made out of, well, the targeting of Hispanic judges because of their last names being Hispanic and so forth. And that produced a little bit of an uproar. I'm glad to say that that situation no longer exists. 13 years later, I think your Hispanic surname is not going to hurt you in Broward County. The fact that you're African American is not going to hurt you in Broward County. The appointment process, I don't think the appointment process has always been pro some governors being more willing and more putting more minorities, Hispanics, African Americans on the bench than others, but that's never been a problem. Anyone can submit to the JNC and get appointed. And in today's, here we are 12 years after the fact that we lost 3 Hispanic judges, and we have at least 12, many of whom ran, many of whom have been appointed, and many like myself and Judge Carlos Rodriguez, because we have very similar experiences, were appointed in 2007, and I believe he was appointed in 2008, and we had to run in 2010 because we picked up an opponent. Fortunately, that turned out well. I won, he won, and the next 10 years has all been positive. Broward County is a very diverse community, and I don't think the fact that your name is, it doesn't matter what your name is. If you go out there, you work hard, you have support behind you, you can become a judge in Broward County.
That's great, Judge. And thank you so much for addressing that. It actually addresses the question that I was going to ask you next, which is if there are special challenges that culturally diverse candidates should consider when seeking appointment or election. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that says it all. I think we're going in the positive direction, and we have been for the last 10 years or so. Can we do better? Absolutely. And I'm always encouraging young Hispanic attorneys, particularly in the Broward County Bar Association's Hispanic Lawyers Committee. I'm constantly telling them, you should consider putting in for county court judge, circuit judge. Just my own personal preference is that I think you should spend a little more, not only legal time, but life's time, because there's a big difference between county court judge and circuit. County is the people's court, but in circuit court judge, you can do a lot of things. You can sentence someone to death. You can incarcerate them for life in prison. You can take their children away. You can do their divorce and determine what property they get and don't get, and so on. So I encourage, I think we got plenty of young Hispanic lawyers that are prepared to be the next generation. And I'm constantly encouraging them, including yourself, Karina.
Well, thank you, Judge. I appreciate that. I'm going to switch gears for a little bit, and I'm going to talk about you becoming a judge. What type of work did you do before becoming a judge?
Mostly a prosecutor. I started off my career working for a 3-attorney law firm in Jersey City, New Jersey. I then interned for a Superior Court judge in Newark, New Jersey. His name was John Dios. He was Cuban, Spanish, very like me, came from the same neighborhood that I did in Newark. As a matter of fact, that's how he gave me the clerkship. He goes, I've never had a clerk, an intern or a clerk from the area I'm from. They call it Down Neck. And he goes, you want the position? I'm like, just like that? He goes, well, just like that. And I took it, and he became a mentor to me. He passed a few years ago, but my dad, Brother Conway, John Dios, those have been the mentors to me. But after that, I became a prosecutor. 2 years in New Jersey, and then 19 years in Broward County. I left the state attorney's office in Broward County. After 19 years, I opened up my own firm I'm not thinking that I would get appointed right away. 6 months later, I was appointed, and that didn't last too long. I was just starting to have fun in private practice, chasing, going out there and getting the clients and working hard and everything. And then this opportunity arose, and here I am, 14 years later.
That's amazing. So you mentioned that an opportunity arose for you to be appointed. What motivated you to change paths and seek that appointment?
That's a good question, because I never really wanted to be a judge. I was happy being a prosecutor, and I was happy going into private practice. A friend of mine came up to me. We were actually having a beer at a pub, McGuire's, that's no longer there. And he goes, you need to put in for judge. He goes, if you can get out of committee, I'll get you appointed, because he had gotten to be very close with a lot of folks down in Miami who had access, political access to the governor at the time. And I knew that with my resume. I mean, I had tried over 200 jury trials to verdict, and they were all felony cases. That had I done that in the private arena, I'd be rich right now. We probably wouldn't be talking. But I knew that I'd get out of committee just based on my resume. And when I got out of committee, I went up to him and said, hey, I did my part of the bargain. Now it's your turn. And he did come through. But I didn't want to be, at first, I actually never really thought about being a judge, but he changed my mind.
And now that you are a judge, what motivates you to continue to be one?
I love being a judge. I started out in dependency, which is a very tough and difficult division. I did a couple of years of that, and then I moved to the criminal bench. Since I was a prosecutor, I was very familiar with the criminal bench. I just wanted to see what it was like from this side of the fence, not being the actual player. I was an umpire, and I enjoyed it. I did that for about 3 years. But I tired of that a little bit, and I don't like to do that. When I find myself in a rut, I go into some, change is something that I look forward to. So I tried the delinquency division. Judge Rodriguez was in it, and he was looking to move to the civil division. So I took his position. He went to civil, and I've been here for 8 years, and I think it's a wonderful division. It's a difficult division. You need to know it's not your normal division. You need to know when it's the right time to be compassionate and the time to be tough. And it's not a division where you're here to punish or anything. You've broken the law. We're going to punish you. It's more a division of what situation is his juvenile in? Where has he come from? Who does he live with? Does he live with mom? Does he live with dad? Does he live with both of them? Does he live with grandma? Where has he been, and why is he here in front of me? And to try to figure out how best to address that so that he doesn't make it to the adult level. When I find out that one of my juveniles is now in adult court, that breaks my heart. And it's a very rewarding part of the job, one that I thought I would never find, and I really enjoy it, much like Judge Elijah Williams does too. Him and I think alike in that aspect, in that regard.
I'm glad that you had that rewarding experience in your position, Judge. Now, when you became a judge, was it exactly what you expected?
More or less. There were some surprising things. One of the things that I found out is it was isolating. You have the courtroom, you go into your chambers, and your JA is there. And I'm on the 4th floor. We have 5 of the North Wing. We have 5 or 6 judges here. And you see them in the hallway and you say, hey, good morning, Judge Coleman or Judge Weeks. And that's all you see. And you don't really get to, it's not the same as when I was working in the state attorney's office. There's a camaraderie and there's this big, everybody is in it together. When you become a judge, all you could do is go to lunch with a judge once or twice a week with your fellow judges, see him in the hallway and stuff, but it's very isolating. It's also a very difficult job, but I think a very meaningful job. I don't think it's for everyone. It's tough. You basically give up your First Amendment rights. You're a judge 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You need to be careful. You can't do anything that's going to bring negative attention to yourself and to the bench, because when you bring it to yourself, you bring it to your other 89 fellow judges on the bench. So it's a wonderful profession. It's for the folks that understand that you're an umpire. You have to be fair, neutral, detached. That's not an easy thing to do, because we're normally not unbiased. We're normally biased. We have opinions. This is my opinion, and you can't go by that. You have to go by the facts that you hear, the law that applies, and then you make the decision according to the facts and the law, and that's it. And then you can't say much. You can't discuss politics. You can't be partisan in any way. So it's not for everybody, but it is a good job. I strongly recommend it to many young, not only Hispanic, but African American and all attorneys. And sometimes if you really think that that's meant for you, it could be just do county court, maybe do it for 6 years, see if you like it. And if you do, then you can move on to circuit and see if it's for you. It may not be for you. We've had judges that were appointed by the governor, and within 6 months, it's like, oh no, this is not what I wanted. This is not what I thought it was.
That's very interesting. And now, Judge, you described several things about being a judge. Were those things that you knew before becoming a judge, or are there some things that you learned about being a judge that you did not realize were the case when you first joined the bench?
The isolationism, that's something that I learned. I didn't realize it was going to be like that. The fact that you don't learn it because you know that a judge has to be fair, but you actually now have to put it into practice. That's the hard part is, okay, judges are supposed to be fair, neutral, impartial, listen to both sides, listen to the evidence. And I went from being an advocate for 21 years on behalf of the state of Florida, the state of New Jersey, to no. I'm not an advocate anymore. I have to listen to what the state says, and I have to listen to what the juvenile says or the defendant says, and then listen to the evidence and make the appropriate determination according to the law. So you know it's there, but it's different to sit on this chair that I'm sitting on and then say, oh, okay, so yeah, no, I can't argue. I'm not here to argue. And I have to be right down the middle and listen to what both sides have to say. It's a very different job than being an advocate. It's just, the perfect analogy is being a baseball player, football player, basketball player, pick whatever sport you want. And that's the attorneys who litigate, and then being the umpire, and that's the judges or the referee. That's us. And you're going from being a player to being an umpire. And you know that, but you don't realize you have to put that into effect until you're in there day one and you're like, okay, now I gotta put it in. Whole new mindset.
That is extremely interesting. Judge, now you mentioned that you were appointed in 2007. Can you tell us what that process was like for you?
The JNC process was good. I had a good interview. The folks on the JNC back then, one of them was Tim Bailey, who's now a judge. I mean, I remember most of them. They were all very fair. They had their questions that they wanted asked. I answered them to the best of my ability. And based upon my resume and how I did on the interview, they thought that I was qualified, and they sent me out. When I went to Tallahassee, that was a little different. You meet with the governor, his legal counsel, and his chief of staff. It could be a little, overwhelming, but you got to ground yourself and just say it's just another job interview, even though it's a job interview with the governor of the state and his chief of staff, and you just do the best you can and hope for the best. And in my case, it turned out really well.
Now, what was it like for you to be a Hispanic judge when you just started out?
There weren't too many Hispanics on the bench. I know, I'm trying to think, Judge Marina Garcia Wood, Judge Gardner, Judge Diaz has been around forever. Judge Diaz, I had cases against Judge Diaz back in the around 1990 or so, and then he became a judge around that time. So he's always been a fountain of information because he's been doing this for a very long time. But they were all very helpful, and as were other judges. And then you gravitate towards the judges that you're compatible with. And I've done that. I have certain judges that I go to when I have I don't know what I'm doing, and it's like here's the facts, here's the law, and frankly, it could go either way. You could rule this way and you'd be fine, or you could rule that way. And when I have cases and issues like that, I'll talk to the judges that I'm close with, all 4, 5, 6 of them, give them a call and say, hey, this is a situation, what do you think? And then I just try to do the best I can. If I'm wrong, the 4th District Court of Appeals will be more than happy to tell me I'm wrong. And if I'm right, they'll PCA it.
Judge, you touched on this a little bit before, but as far as changes from the time that you joined the bench, have you noticed any changes with respect to being a Hispanic judge since you joined the bench?
No, it's just good to see that it's generally accepted that we have plenty of Hispanic judges. We have not enough yet, but we have plenty of them. I think we have 12 or whatever. Likewise, African American judges are moving up and getting to the point where when we get to 20 years, so I think that'll be nice, and it'll be consistent with the population. Because as I sit here every day in my division, I'm getting Hispanic juveniles, lots of them. I'm getting African American juveniles. I'm getting other types of juveniles too. So you want to have litigants, lawyers that come up here and say, oh, Carlos Rebollo, he must be Hispanic, so that they feel comfortable with the system. And it's not going to be a system of, all white males. Because then you get to the point where you're like, okay, so we got 90 all white male judges. And I'm not saying that we can't find 90 qualified white male judges. We can. But our community is not made up of, this isn't 1776. Women weren't allowed to vote until 1920, for Christ's sake. So how's that for, as a society, we've come a long way. I was proud of the fact, I went to Drake University Law School for law school. And I remember the dean saying that it was 1981. He goes, this is the first class where we have more women than men. And I thought, well, you know what? That's a good thing, because they have a room at the law school and they have the graduating classes. And if you look at the pictures of the graduating classes during the 60s, all white males. And it wasn't until the early 70s that you would see an African-American male here and there. And even in 1981, when I started, we had literally about 5 Hispanic out of a class of about 100 and, we started with 210, graduated 170, but we had 5 Hispanic law students, and we had no more than 5 African-American law students. That's changed a lot. It's changing now on the bench here in Florida, and it's a good thing.
That is incredible, Judge. Now, throughout your career, have you experienced or witnessed discrimination against minorities? And if so, what have you learned from those experiences?
I consider myself very lucky, but because I also go out of my way to help. I saw a woman one time changing a tire at a gas station. She just happened to be African American, and I just went over there and I helped her change the tire, because I know changing a tire is not an easy thing. She was thanking me profusely, and I'm thinking, you don't have to thank me. It didn't matter who that would have been. I would have gone over there and helped them. I haven't seen instances in front of me where someone has been overtly racist towards someone else. Had I seen it, I would have definitely interjected and said, no, don't do that, you're wrong, and try to peacefully separate the situation. I've been very lucky Growing up in Newark, you don't really have that racial tension. Newark is a great town. I think if you read about it in today's world, it's come a long, long way. The growing pains that Newark had in the 60s and the 70s, those growing pains are great because now you have a very diverse community over there that everybody gets together. There's a good, and we have a good mayor over there now. His name is Russ Baraka. And I read a story when all the protests were happening as a result of what happened in Minneapolis, that they had the protests in Newark. And he was out there, as was, the folks with him. And that there was a police car and somebody out of nowhere jumped on the police car and everyone was quick to surround him, get him off the police car and say, no, no, we're not about that. We're here to peacefully protest, but we're not about that. So Newark's come a long way, and I'm proud of the leadership it's had, especially through this new mayor, and also through our previous mayor, Cory Booker, who's now a senator. So I've been lucky. I haven't really seen that much. I know it's there. I know it exists. I know I have neighbors that say things that make me want to cringe, and I just walk away and try to distance myself from them. But overt things that have happened in front of me, I've been lucky. I've never really, and I mean, look, when you look at me, obviously you don't think, if you see my name, you think Hispanic male, but if you see me, you're like, oh, he's just another white guy. So maybe because I'm like considered the white guy, I've never had, obviously I've never been wrongfully pulled over by a police officer. Well, I take that back. I was once pulled over for speeding in Georgia. And I told the police, the Georgia trooper, that there's no way I could be speeding because I had it on cruise control on 65. And then he calls me back into his squad car. And this was in the late 80s. And I was still a little cautious. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, what are you calling me back there for? He goes, just come here, come here. And he went back there just to show me that his, and he was, yes, he was a white male. That his, and he had, he looked like a good old boy. And he was just showing me that the radar was working properly. But I think he got the car that was in the left lane and not my car, but I was the one that got pulled over and everything turned out okay. But yes, there are situations out there that are bad. We see them day after day. Hopefully that's changing. I've been lucky. I've never seen too much of it. Had I whether I was a prosecutor or even before, I was brought up that way. If you see something wrong, you do something about it to the extent that you can.
That's great, Judge.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to switch topics a little bit. Not everyone's path to the bench has been the same, but most, if not all, judges have qualities that they share. They're well-rounded, they're dedicated, they're hard workers. What are other qualities that you believe are important for judges to have?
Well, well-rounded, dedicated, and hardworking is very important. You need integrity. You have to be very careful. There's a lot of cases that you can make a political decision on. You should never do that. And you should never do that as a prosecutor. I was a prosecutor for 21 years, and I can tell you that no prosecutor should ever make a political decision. When I say political decision is that you're making a decision based on the politics, whether it's the majority crowd wants it or whether it's somebody else wants it. You make a decision because it's the right thing. That's what's always guided me. Same thing as a judge. A judge should never, 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 never make a political decision. A judge should make a decision on the facts and the law. If you can't do that, that's fine. There's plenty of highly qualified people. We got 10,000 lawyers. There are plenty of highly qualified people that can serve in county and court and circuit court. So you have to have the integrity. You have to understand that you're a judge 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you want to party like it's 1999, this is not the profession for you. And if you're going to do it, you better be discreet and you better be very careful. You better not be driving while you've been drinking. You better not do things that you might do under normal circumstances and you need to be, your family too, because if something happens to you, something happens to your family, let's say your son, and I don't have a son, I have a daughter. So that's why I use son. gets arrested for trespassing, it's going to be in the front page at a minimum of the Metro, the Sun Sentinel. So it's you're under a microscope, and you need to understand that, and you need to want to abide by that. And you do give up your First Amendment freedom of speech rights when you retire from a judge, and as long as you don't continue in senior judgeship role, then you can express all your First Amendment rights and express all the opinions that you want.
Judge, how important is it for individuals to aspire to become judges or successful professionals to have access to good education, internships, clerkships, and mentors? What difference can that make?
Oh, absolutely. That's very important, and that's what you need. You need to have access to the, like I did, to Drake University, and I got a scholarship from them, and I was thankful for that. You need to have judges like myself that are willing to take on interns, and interns that are Hispanic, support staff that are Hispanic. You need to, these opportunities, you need to, I've been in this country since 1962, so I've grown up here. Have strong roots in New Jersey. I've lived in South Florida now for 30 some years, so I have strong roots here. And it's my responsibility is to make it easy for those that come after me, because the ones that came before me, the Bob Diaz's, the Julio Gonzalez's and so forth, they were the trailblazers, and it's our responsibility, and those opportunities have to be made. We need to be able to call the JNC and say, look, hey, you have this person there, he just happens to be Hispanic, but let me tell you about how qualified that person is. They have this, and this, and we need to do that, and we need to open opportunities for Hispanics, African American, and everyone else as well. But they're very important. That's what gives you the opportunity to become a judge, like I did. It's not going to come to you and just fall on your lap. You got to fight for it. But hopefully there are folks like me and yourself, the folks that are members of the Hispanic Bar Association, the Hispanic Lawyers Committee for the Broward County Bar Association, that are aware of the fact that we need to be opening these doors for all those folks that are come after us, the law students right now, whether it's St. Thomas or Nova or University of Miami or FIU or any other law school.
Judge, let me ask you a related question. Do you believe that networking is beneficial to professionals? And if so, what is the basis of that?
Absolutely. Networking is good. I don't see anything negative out of networking, because you get to meet people in different areas, and you get to meet people that are not like you or different than you. And you get to, I would strongly suggest that you engage them and say, oh, so what do you do, and what's your background, and so forth. And the more you learn about people, the better it is for you. That's part of learning and living with folks that are not like you. When I go to a foreign country, like whether it's Scotland or Italy, I go there and I immerse myself. I read about it ahead of time, and then I immerse myself in the culture. And I've come to love the Edinburgh, Scotland, that my wife and I spent some time on, and I fit in after a while. Even though it was difficult at first to understand sometimes some of the folks over there, the way they speak English, you feel like asking for, can I get an interpreter for it? But he's speaking English, because it doesn't sound like it to me. Same thing, whether it's, I love Rome, and I strongly urge everybody in the world should visit Rome at least once. Just for the Vatican and the Roman Colosseum alone is breathtaking. But you have nothing to lose by going to an event and introducing yourself and saying, hey, where are you from? What do you do? Unless, of course, you're very socially inward and just want to stay home and watch TV or whatever. I don't watch TV, very little.
Oh, thank you, Judge. Now, you mentioned a couple of role models before. Can you tell us how these people became your role models?
They were more than role models. They were mentors. One is my father, and if every father should be a mentor to all their all their children's. One was Brother Conway when I was in high school. He was a mentor. He had his Juris Doctorate degree, and he, showed me the way, encouraged me. The judge that I clerked for, how many judges are willing to go to look at a stack of 50 resumes for an internship and go and say, you have a similar background. The Cuban Spanish thing, we're very much alike. You come from the same neighborhood in Newark that I came from. Do you want this position? And he took a risk. If I had messed up the position, then he's like, well, it would have been a negative experience, but it didn't. But sometimes you have to take a risk and if it works out, great. That's what, at least we're trying to open doors to our folks, our people. I know the school board, Patty Good, she had a thing going where it was, it was geared towards getting all the stakeholders within the school system of Hispanic origin just so that they can all get together and all get to know who they are and what can we do to better our Hispanic community and our community in general.
Now, from the conversation we've had so far, it sounds like mentoring younger attorneys is something that you believe it's important to do. Absolutely. Why is that?
Because it's not easy. I know when I graduated in '85, it's not easy going from law student to a lawyer. And you need to know what you're doing. You need to understand what it is you want to do, whether the opportunity is there. If you want to open up your own firm, you better make sure financially you have the capability for that. If you don't, go work for a small firm. Obviously, it's very competitive, and those that graduate in the top 10 of their classes are going to have the opportunities, and they should take advantage of that. If you didn't, that means that 90% of you, you're going to have it a little more difficult. So it's good to have mentors. It's good to have folks that are willing to lend a hand. And I do that all the time. I give my card out at events, and anything that I could help you with, give me a call. And I'll talk to anybody and see what it is that, see if they can learn anything from me, and I'll try to do whatever I can for them. And I strongly encourage, and I know that they do, most of our judges, if not all of them, are always willing to help out a fellow law student, lawyer, to guide them in the right direction.
Are there any types of mentees that you especially enjoy mentoring?
All of them. I like to watch them grow from the time they start, say, whether they start in August and they're gone by December. Just knowing what they were in August to what they've become in December is fascinating. I get certified legal interns in here all the time, and the most important thing to me is, I welcome them and I treat them just as I would any other attorney, and I say, hopefully you'll learn something. And I believe most of the time, everyone that I've had come through here, whether it's my intern or an intern for the state attorney's office or the public defender's office, by the time they left, they've learned something, and that's important.
Thank you so much, Judge. These are all the questions that I have for you today. You have been so generous with your time and so giving with your answers. I so appreciate it.
Anytime. I'll be retiring in some few years. Maybe you could take my seat.
Crossing fingers that happens. Thank you, Judge. That means a lot to me. I so appreciate that.